Hey sports card fans, it's John Wade Boggs fan. Hope you're all doing well. Today I'm going to be showing off the top 10 PSA baseball card sales on eBay for cards from the 1980s for November 2024. Now, for the month of November, there are no new record high sales in the top 10. But if you watched my video from earlier this week where I went over the top 10 PSA vintage baseball card sales for cards from the 1970s, there was one card with two different versions that made the top 10 list. Well, the same thing happened for the 1980s. There's one card with two versions that made this month's top 10 list. So let's go check out the cards that made the top 10 list for the 1980s. Okay, let's get right to it. At number 10, we have this 1989 Topps Traded Tiffany Ken Griffey Jr. card in a PSA 10. This one sold on November 15th for $2,800. It was a best offer. The current VCP average price for a PSA 10 is $2,701. The record high sale, though, was $11,995 back in February of 2021 through a PWCC listing on eBay. There have been 1,473 copies graded a PSA 9. Only 343 have been graded a PSA 10. At number 9, we have this 1989 Upper Deck Ken Griffey Jr. in a PSA 10. This one sold on November 17th for $2,900. It was an auction. There were 32 bids. The current VCP average price for a PSA 10 is $2,207. The record high sale was $6,600 back in February of 2021 through a PWCC listing on eBay. Now, there have been 31,678 copies graded a PSA 9, and 4,180 have been graded a PSA 10. At number 8, we have this 1985 Topps Mark McGwire in a PSA 10. This one sold on November 3rd for $3,175. It was an auction. There were 51 bids. The current VCP average price for a PSA 10 is $2,875. The record high sale was $5,000 back in May of 2020 through eBay. There have been 7,115 copies graded a PSA 9. Only 306 have been graded a PSA 10. At number 7, we have this 1983 Topps Tony Gwynn in a PSA 10. This one sold on November 13th for $3,585. It was a best offer. The current VCP average price for a PSA 10 is $3,355. The record high sale was $4,750 back in February of 2021 through a PWCC listing on eBay. There have been 5,950 copies graded a PSA 9. Only 741 have been graded a PSA 10. Now, there were three other significant 1983 Topps Tony Gwynn sales in November, all PSA 10 copies. The first one sold on November 8th for $3,250. Another one sold on November 24th for $3,178. And finally, one sold on November 2nd for $2,950. At number 6, we have this 1986 Topps Traded Tiffany Barry Bonds in a PSA 10. This one sold on November 12th for $5,985. It was an auction. There were 50 bids. The current VCP average price for a PSA 10 is $6,034. But the record high sale was $16,000, reached twice, both in February of 2021, One was a PWCC listing on eBay, and another one was just a regular eBay listing. Now, there have been 1,471 copies graded a PSA 9. 453 have been graded a PSA 10. Now, there was one other significant 1986 Topps Traded Tiffany Barry Bonds sale in November. Another PSA 10 copy. This one sold on November 3rd for $5,900. At number 5, we have this 1982 Topps Traded Cal Ripken Jr. in a PSA 10. This one sold on November 3rd for $6,901. It was an auction. There were 34 bids. The current VCP average price for a PSA 10 is $5,647. The record high sale was $20,101 back in February of 2021 through a PWCC listing on eBay. There have been 4,476 copies graded a PSA 9. Only 416 have been graded a PSA 10. At number 4, we have this 1980 Topps Willie Stargell in a PSA 10. This particular listing did not have a picture of the back of the card, but this one sold on November 26th for $7,500. It was a best offer. The current VCP average price for a PSA 10 is $5,196. The record high sale was not too far off from this sale here at $7,990 back in November of 2023 through eBay. Now, there have only been 235 copies graded a PSA 9. Only 12 have been graded a PSA 10. At number 3, we have this 1989 Bowman Tiffany Ken Griffey Jr. card in a PSA 10. This one sold on November 9th for $9,500. It was a best offer. The current VCP average price for a PSA 10 is $8,116. The record high sale was $23,800. You guessed it, back in February of 2021 through a PWCC listing on eBay. There have been 486 copies graded a PSA 9. Only 157 have been graded a PSA 10. At number 2, we have this 1985 Topps Tiffany Roger Clemens in a PSA 10. This one sold on November 6th for $11,400. It was an auction. There were 28 bids. The current VCP average price for a PSA 10 is $10,100. But the record high sale was $22,600 back in March of 2021 through a PWCC listing on eBay. There have been 682 copies graded a PSA 9. Only 49 have been graded a PSA 10. And at number 1 for the month of November, this is the card that has a second version. It's the 1985 Topps Tiffany Mark McGwire in a PSA 10. This one sold on November 6th for $17,500. It was an auction. There were 90 bids. The current VCP average price for a PSA 10 is $16,250. But the record high sale was $30,000 back in March of 2021 through eBay. There have been 600 graded a PSA 9. Only 35 have been graded a PSA 10. Well, there you go. The top 10 PSA baseball card sales on eBay for cards from the 1980s for November 2024. As always, would love to know what you think in the comments about the cards that made the top 10 list. And with that, that's all I have for you. So until next time, thanks for watching.